Turn to your next blank page in your journal, put today's date at the top, and today's title is Lesson 9-2, Line Graphs. The extra supplies that you will need for today are a ruler and a glue stick. Please press pause while you gather your supplies and put your date and your title. We have 3 new vocabulary words that we need to add today to our journal using 2-column notes. They are line graph, increase, and decrease. Remember yesterday we talked about bar graphs, and we said we use bar graphs when we are asked to compare data. Today we're going to be working with line graphs, and we use a line graph when we were showing change over time. The important thing to remember on a line graph is your unit of time that you are given must always be on the x-axis. You are also going to be asked to analyze line graphs and interpret line graphs. And the most important words that you will use to interpret line graphs are increase, which means to go up, and decrease, which means to go down. Please hit pause and copy your vocabulary into your journal. In front of you, you should have a copy of a line graph, blank line graph sheet for us to fill in together. So let's look at number 1. It says make a line graph of the data, then describe the change from 1960 to 1995. So the first thing we need to do is label our x-axis, our y-axis, and write a title on our graph. If you will look here, there's the title, U.S. water consumption. Remember, the time always goes on the x-axis, so the year is going to go on the x-axis, and what I am measuring, the change over time, is going to go on my y-axis. So let's label your graph. My title is U.S. water consumption, my x-axis label is years, and my y-axis label is water consumed per day. Don't forget to add in billion gallons. Next, let's write in our years. Notice we need to go from 1960 to 1995. So I'm going to start here with 1960. And I'm going to count by increments of 5. So 1965, 1970, 1975, 1980, 1985, 1990, and 1995. Next, we need to come up with our scale. So notice, our greatest number is 100, so I know I need to go up at least to 100 and probably a little bit higher. And so I'm kind of looking at my ranges, and I'm going to choose to count by 20s as my interval. So I have a 0 at where the x and y axis meet. Then I have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and 120. Now I'm ready to plot my data. So we're going to look. In 1960, 61 billion gallons of water were used. So I'm going to come over to 1960, just a little bit above 60, and put a dot. Now let's go to 1965. In 1965, there were 77 billion gallons used per day. So I'm going to come over in 1965. Notice 70 is about halfway between 60 and 80. So I'm going to go up just a little bit from there and put a dot to represent the 77. Now let's go to 1970. In 1970, there were 87 billion gallons used on average. So 1970, I'm going to go up. Here's 80. Halfway between 80 and 100 is 90, so it's going to be a little under the halfway mark. Now let's go to 1975. 1975 was 96. So 96 is almost to 100, but not quite. Then 1980 was 100, so I'm going to go up to 100 and put a point. 85 was 92. So if I go halfway between 80 and 100, that's 90. So I'm going to go just a little bit more than halfway up to show 92. Then in 1990, it was 94 billion gallons. So I'm going to go up. We know that this was 92, so 94 is going to be just a little bit higher. And then in 1995, it was 100. Now you need to use your ruler to make straight lines between the dots. So now let's look at our graph. Notice anytime my line is pointing upward, that is showing an increase. But notice here when my line goes down, that's showing a decrease. So notice from 1960 to 1980, I had an increase. And then from 1980 to 1985, there was a slight decrease. And then from 85 to 95, there was also a slight increase. So now let's sentence to analyze or interpret graph. So it says water consumption blank from 1960 to 1995 with a slight blank in use between 1980 and 1995. So let's see what happened. From 1960 to 1995, notice it for the most part it went up. But then in 1980 to 1995, it had a slight decrease. So we can say water consumption increased from 1960 to 1995 with a slight decrease in use between 1980 and 1995. Press pause to finish writing in your interpretation. Now let's look at question number 2. I'm given a table with data for yearly snowfall. It gives me the years and it gives me the total amount of snowfall in inches. So we need to start with the title. So we need to figure out what our graph is going to be talking about, and it is yearly snowfall. Next, we need to label our x-axis, and that is always our unit of time. And the unit of time we're talking about is years. Then we need to label our y-axis, and we're talking about and measuring total snowfall in inches. Don't forget to include inches. Next, we need to label our years. So we're going to start with 1997. And I've already counted in advance, and I know that I can skip every other line. So I'm going to do 1997, then I'm going to skip and go to 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, and 2002. Now I need to find my scale. Notice my greatest amount of snowfall is 24, so I need to go a little bit higher than 24 with my scale. I'm noticing that most of these are close to multiples of 5, so I'm going to choose to count by 5s. So I always start with 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and if I go to 25, 25 is just a little bit higher than my highest piece of data of 24. I want you to hit pause and make your graph on your own. Now you may check your graph. Now let's use our graph to answer a multiple choice question. It says, describe the change from 1997 to 2002. So let's look at our answer choices. A says total snowfall decreased from 1997 to 1999. So let's start by checking that. So I'm going to look 97 to 99. I notice it did decrease because it went down. So I'm going to put a check on that because that's true. It says that it increased from 99 to 2002. So notice from 99 to 2002, it wasn't a straight increase. It stayed the same, it decreased, then it increased. So that is not correct. So A cannot be the correct answer. Let's look at B. It says total snowfall decreased from 97 to 2000. So here's 97 to 2000. That was a slight decrease. It stayed the same 1 year, but it still was a decrease. And then increased from 2000 to 2002. So notice from 2000 to 2002, there was a big decrease in there. So that is not correct. So let's look at C. Total snowfall decreased from 97 to 2000, 97 to 2000, and increased in 2001. Well, notice it went down in 2000, so that was a decrease. So that is not correct. So let's prove why D is correct. It says the snowfall decreased from 97 to 2001. It slowly went down and then increased in 2002, and it did. So my answer is D. Let's look at question number 3. It says the average retail price for a loaf of white bread for the years of 1996 to 2004 is shown in the graph below. Predict the price of a loaf of white bread in 2010. Well, notice that my graph doesn't go all the way to 2010. So what I need to do is I need to extend the graph to go to 2010. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue the graph with a dotted line in the same direction until I get to 2010. The reason I use a dotted line is because that is just going to be a prediction. So notice it's pretty much kind of a steady increase. It evens out. So I'm going to kind of follow the line and predict it's still going to continue to slightly go up. So now I'm going to come to 2010. I'm going to go up, and my prediction is that a loaf of bread is going to cost about $1.20. So remember, if you don't have the actual data to support the graph because you're making a prediction, always use a dotted line to continue the graph. Number 4, the average income for full-time employees of a corporation for the years 1995 to 2004 is shown in the graph to the right. Predict the average income in 2008. So notice on my graph, I have a pretty steady increase. I'm going to follow the line that's already there and predict that it's going to continue to go up at the same rate. So I need to come to 2008, go up. I see it crosses right about this line, which if I go across would be here, and that is exactly halfway between 80,000 and 100,000. So that would represent about 90,000. I want you to hit pause and answer question number 5 on your own, and I want you to answer in a complete sentence. Okay, let's check our work. The correct answer that you should have marked was D, or written the complete sentence. The popularity of the fair dropped from 1985 to 2000 and then increased through 2005. And then here's your cartoon for today. And here's a chart that shows what you might see if you looked at a mountain range through a tennis racket.